I take examples that make it sense, right? So the first example in strategy development. So I have a current engagement. I'm working with a large CPG company on helping them identify and define their pricing engine, right? So essentially what you charge. And some of that is essentially looking at historical data. Some of that is also looking at competitive positioning and figuring out where there are portions on the pricing curve that are under optimized, or essentially you could introduce newer ways of product assortment, right? So you have a pack of 50 cents. Can you introduce a $1 product, right? So running simulations, tests on new strategy, taking into account everything that they have done. So where it becomes very interesting is that like most of the calculation work is done in an autonomous manner, but we need to have a human in the loop, right? You don't want to be essentially introducing new products and essentially coming up with a recommendation that, hey, you were at 50 cents, all of a sudden you're doubling the price to $1, and then you're realizing that you're resulting in a lot of market share, right? So you don't want to go down all the way, right? So there is human in the loop, but the agents are able to run simulations, are able to provide emergent insights with regards to where should you be pricing. So that's one example in terms of strategy definition. The second one, which is like to Guillermo's point, is something that we are very familiar with around agents doing continuously market monitoring with regards to volatility, regulatory changes, right? So when you look at your phones, you see all these news briefs come in, right? Like all of that is through automation, right? Like so now you're beginning to see agents that will execute a trade. So if they see a security moved by X, they can take all of that information and execute a trade end to end, right? So now you're going into that. And then, so that's on the definition side. I'm also beginning to see autonomous agents being deployed on the execution side, right? So this is where Jay, I was just trying to be a little bit like together. Around supply chain, right? So flights get delayed, right? So all of a sudden now you have rebooking happening, right? So when you travel, all of a sudden you get an information saying that, hey, your flight got canceled. An agent monitored whatever available options is, and it starts spitting out an answer to you on the get-go. It doesn't wait for you to make a call. It tells you, here are your options. Some of that is through automation, some of that is through agents, but that's another simplified example of where they are. And then Guy had talked about, right, end-to-end chatbots, right, which is essentially, right, hey, I want to take PTO between X date and Y date. That's essentially the lowest form of automation and agents that can take that query, ingest it, and give you very specific answers around what policies you need to be. And that's similar for expenses, that's similar for PTO tracking. But those are the types of examples where I've seen it being implemented on the strategy definition side, execution side, but it's a continuous loop, right? You don't want to be essentially be doing one thing and then realize that the other one is completely out of sync. So that's the few examples that I think of that companies are beginning to implement on the agent side and implementing them going forward.
I'm so
yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, Guillermo, go ahead.
I'm so excited about this prospect about using agents within the context of strategy, especially in the part of strategy formulation, because I've gone through strategy formulation processes a few times in many industries, and it's very hard to deal with the volume of information you have to consider simultaneously while defining a strategy, right? It's the macroeconomics, the value chain, the supply chain, the markets, competitors, and so on. It's a very complex analysis to be done. And on the very next day you've done it, it's outdated, right? Because the world shifted already. Some new competitor came in, some supplier is not financially stable, or it's extremely dynamic, and any one of these changes can impact your strategy, right? So I see the use of agents in this context, like continuously monitoring the environment and detecting relevant triggers to alert, you have to take a look at this because it can have some serious impact on the ongoing strategy that you're implementing, right? So it can deal with a lot of information at once, something that a human wouldn't be able to, right? Read all the news in the world, read all the regulations that are being passed in the world, and so on.
Right, Gearman, like that was when I was at Moody's. One of the constant struggle I used to have every morning before the markets open, because it's a global company. A lot of things happen in Asia, a lot of things happen in Europe before the time you wake up in United States. And that used to be one question that used to be, what has changed overnight that I need to be aware of, and what does it mean for the organization on a day-to-day basis, right? So we had to put a lot of automation to collect, synthesize, and put it in a manner that at least there were many big changes, or these are all like an amalgamation of small things, and then the only one thing that matters is so being able to identify, being able to synthesize and summarize and provide it in a manner that's helpful. So that was an ever evolving process, and I agree with your point that like this is where I am so excited about as well myself.